The simple life of 19th century Irish farmers. Hello, my dear friends. Picture yourself walking through the lush, rolling hills of Ireland in the 19th century. The air is fresh, filled with the vibrant scent of earth and grass, and a soft breeze kisses your skin. You can almost hear the distant clanging of tools as farmers toil under the watchful gaze of the sun. Amidst this idyllic backdrop, you might imagine a life of abundance, where nature provides for all. But let's not be fooled. You probably won't survive this scene without understanding the underlying struggles. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. As you settle in, envision the daily rhythm of a rural Irish farmer in the 1800s. Mornings began at dawn, with roosters crowing and the first light illuminating the dew-laden fields. Families would rise early, their bodies accustomed to labour, the weight of existence pressing upon their shoulders. The picturesque view of thatched-roof cottages dotting the valleys hides a life of perseverance against the elements and the economic tides that swept through the land. The glamorous illusion of the 19th century Irish farmer's life is often painted with strokes of pastoral charm, lush fields, happy families working in harmony with the land. Yet beneath this surface, a shocking reality lurks. While the countryside may look bountiful, the truth is that many farmers lived on the edge of subsistence, struggling to cultivate enough to feed their families and pay rent to landowners. The very beauty of the landscape belied the hardships faced daily. So, why was this reality accepted? The social structure in Ireland during this period was heavily influenced by British rule, where land was owned by a privileged class, and the farmers were often tenants, bound by the whims of their landlords. This created a dependency that made any form of rebellion against the diet and lifestyle seem futile. Imagine living with the constant threat of eviction looming over you, where every potato harvested was a small victory against a crushing reality. The diet of Irish farmers was not merely a reflection of personal choice, but a response to economic necessity and the environment. The common fare consisted largely of potatoes, a crop that thrived in the Irish soil. But, as we will soon discover, this reliance, while sustaining, was fraught with peril. The farming techniques employed were as simple and stark as the diets. Men and women alike would work the fields, using tools passed down through generations. Their hands would be calloused from constant labour, but there was a sense of pride in nurturing the land. The connection to the soil was intimate. It was not just a means of survival, but a way of life, steeped in tradition and community. Within this framework, it is crucial to understand how the seasons dictated not just the work done in the fields, but also the food consumed. Spring brought planting, summer was for harvesting, and winter was a time of reflection and anticipation for the next cycle. Each season shaped the diet and, by extension, the health of the farmers and their families. As you drift deeper into this world, remember that beneath the surface of every potato and every field lay stories of hardship, resilience, and a relentless pursuit of sustenance. The glamorous illusion of abundance. As you step further into the 19th century Irish landscape, you might find yourself enchanted by the serene beauty around you. The rolling green hills create an impression of endless, untouched bounty. Cattle graze lazily, and sheep dot the hillsides like fluffy clouds. The picturesque cottages seem to belong in a painting, each one telling a story of pastoral bliss. But hold on a moment, this is merely the glamorous illusion of abundance, carefully curated by time and memory. Underneath this lovely fade lies an uncomfortable truth waiting to be unwrapped. The reality, the life of an Irish farmer was often a tightrope walk between survival and despair. While the landscape appeared rich and fertile, farmers struggled to scrape together enough food to sustain themselves. The potato, while it may seem like a blessing due to its hardiness and caloric density, became both the lifeblood and the potential downfall of these communities. The reliance on this singular crop created a precarious situation, especially when the whims of weather and disease turned against them. Imagine, then, what it must have felt like to see your fields lush with green one day and then face the devastation of blight the next. The truth is that for many families, the harvest was the difference between life and death. The beautiful illusion of thriving farms was often punctuated by moments of stark horror when the realization hit that there would be no food on the table come winter. This illusion was perpetuated not just by the farmers themselves, but also by others. Romanticized narratives of the time. Writers and artists painted a picture of the pastoral ideal, elevating the lifestyle of the agrarian class to something almost mythical. But the reality was a far cry from these glossy depictions. Farmers worked from dawn till dusk, often labouring in the rain, their backs bent under the weight of their burdens. The economic structure of the time bolstered this glamorous facade. Landlords, often absentee, would visit their estates only occasionally, basking in the visual splendor of their holdings. They were detached from the daily struggles of their tenants, who lived under the shadow of their demands. This disconnect allowed a narrative of abundance to flourish, one that overlooked the grueling reality faced by those who actually worked the land. Yet, despite this overwhelming pressure, there was a communal spirit among farmers. They shared the spoils of their labor, ensuring that even during tough times, no one went hungry for long. But this reliance on community also sowed the seeds of vulnerability. When one family fell ill or experienced a poor harvest, it rippled through the network, affecting everyone. So why was this glamorization of agricultural life accepted? Perhaps it was easier to cling to the notion of abundance, to believe in the harmony of life on the land. The idea of a simple, idyllic existence provided a sense of comfort amid the harsh realities of life. It allowed families to persevere, to find joy in the small moments, even when hunger gnawed at their bellies. The beauty of the landscape served as a balm for their collective struggles, a reminder that life, despite its challenges, still held moments of grace. As you delve deeper into this narrative, recall those vibrant fields that stand in stark contrast to the hidden fears and harsh truths of the farmers' lives. The facade crumbles as we explore the very foundation of their diets and the delicate balance they maintained with their environment. Potato, a staple and a curse. Imagine stepping into a dimly lit cottage, the earthy aroma of soil still clinging to your clothes after a long day in the fields. You gather around a modest wooden table, your family close by, and what's served for dinner? Potatoes boiled, perhaps, or mashed, with a sprinkle of salt if you're lucky. The humble potato, once the symbol of sustenance, now looms over you as both a staple and a curse. This unassuming tuber formed the backbone of the Irish diet, and while it provided a reliable source of calories, its very dominance also set the stage for catastrophe. You might picture the potato as a miracle crop, nutritious, easy to grow, and versatile. By the early 19th century, it became the primary food source for millions of Irish farmers. This simple vegetable was both a blessing and a burden, as it thrived in the Irish climate and poor soil, allowing families to feed themselves with relative ease. But beneath this veneer of reliability lay the shocking reality: and over-reliance on a single crop left farmers vulnerable to disaster. The infamous Great Famine of 1845-1852 was the dark culmination of this dependence. A devastating potato blight ravaged crops across Ireland, leading to widespread starvation. It was a catastrophic failure, not just of agriculture, but of an entire societal system that had grown too reliant on one food source. Imagine watching the fields that once yielded bountiful harvests wither and decay, leaving nothing but desolation in their wake. But why would an entire population commit to such a precarious diet? The answer lies in the historical context. The 19th century Irish economy was largely agrarian, and for tenant farmers, the land was rented from landlords, who demanded a portion of the harvest. Thus, farmers focused on cultivating potatoes easy to grow and incredibly energy-dense rather than diversifying their crops. This decision was driven by necessity. They needed to maximize yields to feed their families and pay their rents, leading to a single crop dependency that would spell disaster when the blight hit. Consider how this singular focus on growing potatoes affected not just the farmers, but their entire communities. Meals typically centered around this staple, leaving little room for variety. When additional crops were interspersed, they were often overshadowed by the potato's prominence. This lack of dietary diversity led to nutritional deficiencies, as families lacked access to vital vitamins and minerals necessary for overall health. As you think about the humble potato, it's essential to recognize its dual nature. On one hand, it nourished countless families and allowed them to survive in a time of economic hardship. On the other, it became a symbol of vulnerability. The illusion of abundance that potatoes provided also masked the risks inherent in such a singular diet. The abundance of potatoes could quickly turn into a scarcity when disaster struck. Beyond the dinner table, these potatoes' role also deeply influenced social structures. The reliance on this crop created layers of complexity within the farming community. Those who grew potatoes well could thrive, while those who failed faced dire consequences. The agricultural landscape was fraught with tension, as families battled not only the elements but also economic pressures that dictated their every choice. Yet, even amidst this turmoil, the resilient spirit of the Irish people shone through. Communities banded together, sharing what little they had. Neighbors would trade and support one another, creating networks of solidarity in the face of adversity. The humble potato, while a curse in times of famine, also became a rallying point for collective resilience. As you reflect on the duality of the potato, its role as both sustenance and potential downfall, consider how the lessons learned echo through time. The reliance on this crop serves as a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of diversity both in diet and community. With this understanding, we can prepare to explore the rich tapestry of the Irish diet, revealing not only the beloved potato but also the other foods that played a crucial role in the lives of Irish farmers. Dietary diversity, more than just potatoes as you sit around that same wooden table, the warmth of the hearth flickering nearby. Let's peel back the layers of the Irish diet to uncover the hidden gems that often get overshadowed by the prominence of potatoes. While these tubers may have formed the cornerstone of sustenance for 19th century Irish farmers, the reality of their culinary world was a rich tapestry woven from various ingredients and traditions. Beyond the humble potato lies an array of foods that contributed to their daily meals, shaping their nutrition and community life in ways often overlooked. Picture the sprawling fields, not just dotted with potato plants, but also brimming with other crops. Barley, oats, and rye were cultivated alongside potatoes, used to create hearty breads and porridge. These grains were staples in the diet and provided essential carbohydrates and fibers, which balanced the otherwise starky meals. In a world where calories were hard-won, grains represented not just sustenance but versatility in cooking. Imagine waking up to the smell of freshly baked soda bread, its crust crispy and warm, ready to be slathered with butter or dipped into a bowl of steaming porridge. However, the glamorous illusion of a bountiful diet is often punctured by the reality that many farmers lacked access to a variety of foods, especially protein sources. Meat was a luxury reserved for special occasions, not a daily staple. The shocking truth is that many families relied heavily on dairy products, particularly milk, cheese and butter, to fulfill their nutritional needs. Cows were not just livestock, they were vital to the family unit, offering not only milk but also manure for fertilizing the fields. The connection between the land, the animals, and the people was an intricate dance of dependency, a cycle of life and nourishment. Why did this reliance on dairy and grains develop amid a landscape so rich in potential? Historically, the Irish farming model was largely subsistence-based. Farmers grew what they could afford, and the economic and social systems made meat an infrequent luxury. It was not uncommon for families to own a few chickens or pigs, but these animals were typically reserved for celebrations or emergencies, never to be seen as a constant source of food. The farming culture was one of pragmatism, shaped by the harsh realities of existence. When you think of traditional Irish cuisine, you might also conjure images of fish, perhaps a fresh catch from a nearby river or the sea, often salted or smoked for preservation. However, fishing was another activity heavily dependent on local resources and weather conditions. While the coastal communities thrived on fish, many inland farmers were left with limited access, making these aquatic delicacies an occasional treat rather than a staple. As you delve deeper into the culinary practices of this era, you'll discover the importance of foraging. Wild greens, herbs and berries were gathered during the growing season, adding diversity to their meals. The subtle flavors of nettles, dandelions, and wild garlic would find their way into soups and stews, elevating the otherwise monotonous fare. The act of foraging was not just a means of survival, but a communal activity that fostered connection with the land and each other. However, the reality of food preservation also loomed large. Let's not forget the challenge of keeping food from spoiling, especially in a time before refrigeration. Farmers would employ various techniques: salting, smoking, drying, and pickling to ensure they had enough provisions to last through the winter months. The shocking truth is that what might appear as a lack of culinary sophistication was, in fact, a testament to their resourcefulness. Every scrap of food was utilized, and waste was a luxury no one could afford. Yet, despite these efforts, the spectre of famine lingered, reminding farmers of the fragility of their existence. The oscillation between abundance and scarcity shaped their meals, reinforcing the notion that every meal could be a celebration or a desperate attempt at survival. As you reflect on the diverse ingredients that made up the Irish diet, remember that these choices were not merely about sustenance, but represented a complex interplay of culture, environment, and economic reality. The flavors of barley bread, the richness of dairy, and the thrill of foraged greens painted a picture of life that was much more vibrant than the singular focus on potatoes might suggest. With this appreciation for the dietary diversity that existed alongside the potato, we can transition to how traditional farming techniques played a crucial role in shaping not only the food produced, but also the very fabric of rural Irish society. The role of traditional farming techniques. As you walk through the picturesque Irish countryside, you can't help but feel a deep connection to the land and the methods that shaped it. The rolling hills, once tilled and nurtured by generations of farmers, tell a story that goes beyond mere survival. They reflect the heart and soul of a community intertwined with its environment. Let's explore the traditional farming techniques employed by 19th century Irish farmers and how these practices were not only vital for food production, but also fundamental to the societal fabric of rural life. Imagine the soft sound of shovels digging into the rich, dark earth, the rhythmic motion of men and women working side by side as they prepared the fields for planting. The farming community relied heavily on methods passed down through generations, creating a bond that tied them to the land. These traditional techniques were rooted in a deep understanding of the environment and the seasonal cycles, relying on what nature provided rather than the modern machinery that dominates agriculture today. The glamour of this pastoral existence comes alive in the simplicity of these practices. For instance, the use of crop rotation was a key method, where farmers would alternate the types of crops grown in a particular field each year. This practice helped maintain soil fertility and reduce the risk of pest infestations. However, the shocking reality is that without modern fertilizers or pesticides, farmers had to rely on their knowledge of the land, making their success contingent on the whims of nature. If the weather turned against them, their carefully laid plans could disintegrate like so many dry leaves in the wind. As you delve into the specifics, consider the significance of the plough, simple yet effective tool that revolutionized farming practices. Traditionally made from wood and iron, this plough allowed farmers to turn the soil and prepare it for sowing seeds. The labor required to use such a tool was considerable, yet it was essential for maintaining the health of the crops being planted. It was a back-breaking task, but the sense of accomplishment that came from working the land was profound. But why were these farming techniques so deeply entrenched in the culture of rural Ireland? The interconnectedness of community and agriculture fostered a collective identity that transcended individual families. Farming was not solely an economic endeavor, it was a way of life. The agricultural calendar dictated social events, planting and harvest festivals, bringing people together to celebrate the fruits of their labor. This shared experience reinforced communal ties, helping to weave a tight-knit social fabric grounded in mutual reliance. Yet, the shocking truth is that as much as these practices fostered community, they also reinforced social hierarchies. Wealthy landowners often controlled the best lands, leaving tenant farmers to cultivate smaller, less fertile plots. The techniques employed were often a reflection of their economic status. Wealthier farmers had the means to implement more effective practices, while poorer farmers clung to traditional methods out of necessity. This disparity created a divide that echoed through the community, illustrating how agriculture could simultaneously unite and divide. The seasonal rhythms of traditional farming also dictated food availability and dietary practices. Spring marked the beginning of planting, with seeds sown into the earth as families prayed for a good harvest. Summer was a time of vigilance, tending to crops while the sun beat down mercilessly. With the arrival of autumn came the harvest, a labor-intensive period marked by both joy and anxiety. The bounty of the fields was gathered, and the fear of what the winter would bring loomed large. Many farmers utilized communal labor systems, where neighbors would band together to assist one another with the harvest. This practice not only lightened the workload, but also strengthened social bonds. It was common for farmers to share tools and labor, reinforcing the idea that survival depended on collaboration. But this reliance on one another also added a layer of vulnerability. If one family struggled, it could pull down the entire community like a house of cards. As you absorb the intricacies of these farming techniques, remember that they formed the lifeblood of rural Irish society. The rhythm of planting and harvesting, the communal efforts, and the connection to the land created a shared experience that was both beautiful and fraught with peril. The farming methods may have appeared simple, but they were steeped in tradition, knowledge, and resiliency, reflection of the spirit of the Irish people. Now, as we explore the nutritional implications of these farming practices, we will reveal the hidden costs associated with the diets of these farmers, shedding light on the health consequences of their agricultural choices. Nutrition and health, the hidden costs. As you settle into the familiar warmth of that cozy cottage, let's delve deeper into the hidden costs of the diet sustained by 19th century Irish farmers. The food they consumed, while seemingly ample and nourishing, often masked significant nutritional deficiencies that wove long-lasting health implications. The contrast between the perception of a hearty diet and the reality of inadequate nutrition reveals a troubling truth about the human cost of their agricultural practices. Imagine a typical family meal, a steaming bowl of potato stew paired with freshly baked soda bread. On the surface, it looks comforting and satisfying, a visual display of abundance. But as you take a bite, consider what's missing from the plate. Potatoes, while a reliable source of calories, lack vital nutrients such as protein, vitamins and minerals. The shocking reality is that many Irish farmers and their families suffered from malnutrition, leading to a range of health issues over time. The average diet was heavily skewed towards carbohydrates, with the potato becoming the dominant food source. While this starchy vegetable provided the necessary energy to fuel their labor, it was devoid of essential proteins. Meat was a luxury rarely afforded, and while dairy products supplemented their intake, they were not always enough to meet the nutritional needs of growing children or the physically demanding lifestyle of adults. Imagine the apprehension felt by mothers as they watched their children grow weaker, knowing that their diets lacked the diversity needed for healthy development. Why did this situation persist, despite the apparent abundance of food? The answer lies in the socio-economic realities of the time. The agrarian economy prioritized quantity over quality. Farmers were focused on producing enough calories to survive rather than cultivating a balanced diet. The pressure to grow more potatoes to meet the demands of landlords and to feed families created a mentality of scarcity, one that overlooked the importance of nutritional variety. As you explore the implications of this dietary imbalance, consider the health consequences that followed. Conditions such as scurvy and rickets became prevalent among children, their bodies stunted by a lack of essential vitamins and minerals. The irony is palpable. In a land rich with fertile soil and potential, families were falling prey to preventable diseases simply because their agricultural practices failed to provide a balanced diet. The reliance on potatoes also meant that when disaster struck like the potato blight during the Great Famine, people had no backup plan. With such a singular focus on this one crop, the landscape of their health deteriorated rapidly when their primary source of sustenance was compromised. Imagine the horror of watching fields that once promised survival turn into barren wastelands, leaving families scrambling for food as they faced starvation. Additionally, the hidden costs of this diet extended to mental health. The constant worry about inadequate food supplies and the pressures of agricultural life created a stress-laden existence. Anxiety over crops failing and the spectre of eviction loomed large, contributing to a sense of hopelessness that permeated rural communities. The mental toll of such a lifestyle cannot be overstated. It was a weight that pressed down on farmers, making every meal a reminder of their struggles. In the face of these challenges, the resilience of the Irish people shone through. Communities often came together to support one another, pooling resources and sharing what little they had. This camaraderie fostered a sense of belonging and collective strength, even as they grappled with the hidden costs of their subsistence lifestyle. As you ponder the nutritional deficiencies that plagued these farmers, remember that their experiences were not just about food. They were entwined with social structures, economic pressures and cultural practices. The vibrant tapestry of their lives was woven with both the visible and the hidden, painting a complex picture of endurance and hardship. With this understanding of the stark realities of nutrition and health, we will now turn our gaze to the devastating impact of the Great Famine on agricultural practices and the broader societal beliefs that shaped the lives of Irish farmers. The impact of the Great Famine. As you draw closer to the hearth, the flickering flames cast shadows on the walls, reminiscent of the darker chapters in Irish history. The Great Famine, or the Irish Potato Famine, stands out as one of the most harrowing periods in the lives of 19th-century Irish farmers. It was a time when the beautiful illusion of bountiful fields and plentiful harvests shattered, revealing the raw, painful reality of dependence on a single crop. This cataclysm not only altered the agricultural landscape but also reshaped societal beliefs and practices for generations to come. Picture the scene: fields once overflowing with lush potato plants, the pride of the farmers, now fall into despair as a blight spreads like wildfire. The fungal disease, known as lake blight, wreaked havoc on crops in 1845, and the consequences were devastating. Imagine being a farmer standing amid your fields, watching in horror as the green leaves turned brown and wrote a sign of impending doom. The shocking truth was that this disaster would lead to the deaths of approximately 1 million people and the emigration of another million, forever altering the demographics of Ireland. As the blight spread, the reliance on potatoes exposed the fragility of the entire agricultural system. Families who had depended on this humble tuber for their very survival were suddenly faced with emptiness. The illusion of abundance vanished, leaving despair in its wake. The Great Famine starkly highlighted the risks associated with monoculture, the practice of growing a single crop to the exclusion of others. Farmers had invested everything in potatoes, and when disaster struck, they were left unprepared. But why did the Irish farmers cling so tightly to this crop? The answer lies in the complex interplay of economics, culture, and history. The agricultural practices of the time were shaped by both necessity and tradition. With land owned by a small number of landlords, tenant farmers focused their efforts on cultivating potatoes as a quick and calorie-dense means of meeting their needs. The pressure to yield enough to survive and to pay rent left little room for diversification. The effects of the famine rippled through the social fabric of Ireland. The once thriving communities found themselves fragmented, as families were forced to abandon their homes in search of food or work elsewhere. Cities became overcrowded with desperate individuals seeking refuge, while rural areas faced abandonment. The societal belief in communal support began to fray as people turned inward, facing the harsh reality of survival. During this crisis, the British government's response has been heavily criticised. Policies implemented at the time often failed to address the immediate needs of the starving population. Relief efforts were insufficient and poorly managed, leading to feelings of betrayal and resentment among the Irish people. The perception that their suffering was ignored further solidified a sense of collective identity rooted in hardship and struggle. As you reflect on the impact of the Great Famine, consider its long-lasting effects on the Irish psyche. The trauma of starvation would leave scars that shaped cultural narratives and identity for generations. The shared history of loss and resilience created a bond that transcended individual suffering, fostering a sense of unity among those who endured. Moreover, these famine set the stage for the mass emigration that followed. Families fleeing the horrors of famine sought a better life abroad, leading to the establishment of Irish communities in countries like the United States, Canada, and Australia. These migrations not only affected Ireland's demographics, but also introduced Irish culture to new corners of the world. The experience of exile and longing for home became deeply ingrained in the Irish identity. As you absorb the profound impact of the Great Famine, remember that its effects were not just about starvation and death. They reshaped the agricultural landscape, societal beliefs, and cultural identity. The echoes of this tragedy still resonate today, reminding us of the fragility of life and the power of resilience in the face of adversity. With this understanding of the Great Famine's far-reaching consequences, we will next explore the economic framework that underpinned farming practices, revealing how these structures dictated the diets and livelihoods of Irish farmers. The economic framework of farming. As you settle deeper into the intimate glow of the fire, let's turn our attention to the economic framework that shaped the lives of 19th-century Irish farmers. To better understand their diets and agricultural practices, we must recognize the economic realities dictating their existence, molded by centuries of land ownership patterns, political influence, and social hierarchies. The pulse of rural Ireland was not merely about farming, it was about navigating a complex web of economic dependencies and social dynamics that affected every aspect of life. Imagine the landscape, dotted not just with fields but also with the looming presence of grand estates owned by absentee landlords. These landowners, often British, held sway over the lives of countless Irish farmers, who were merely tenants on lands they did not own. The shocking truth is that this system of land tenancy created a precarious existence. Farmers were at the mercy of their landlords, who could raise rents or evict families with little notice. The glamour of a pastoral life was overshadowed by the constant threat of displacement. The economic pressures faced by tenant farmers forced them to prioritize immediate survival over long-term sustainability. With a heavy portion of their harvest going toward rent, farmers were compelled to grow crops that would yield the most calories in the shortest amount of time. Potatoes became the answer, but this focus stifled agricultural innovation. The pursuit of profit for landlords took precedence over the health and well-being of the tenants, creating an economic model that fostered dependency and vulnerability. Why did this system persist for so long? The answer lies in the power dynamics between landowners and tenants. Landlords saw their estates as investments, viewing their tenants as mere tools to bring profit. Conversely, farmers were entrenched in a cycle of poverty, where every decision was dictated by the need to pay rent and feed their families. This imbalance created a strained relationship that undermined the potential for agricultural progress, pushing farmers into an unsustainable reliance on the potato. As you reflect on these economic realities, consider how they shaped not just individual lives, but entire communities. The constant pressure to meet rent obligations meant that farmers often lacked the resources to properly diversify their crops, invest in better farming techniques, or even improve their own living conditions. The stunning irony is that their labor sustained the very system that oppressed them, creating a paradox where the very heart of the economy the farmers remained trapped in a cycle of poverty. The market for agricultural products further complicated this landscape. Farmers were often forced to sell their produce at prices set by landlords or local merchants, leaving them with little control over their livelihoods. This led to a lack of investment in local economies, as the wealth generated by agriculture flowed upwards, reinforcing the social hierarchies of the time. As communities struggled to cope with these pressures, the impact on diet became evident. The economic framework dictated what farmers could grow and eat, resulting in a monotonous diet centered on potatoes and dairy. The lack of access to diverse foods meant that many households lacked the nutrients necessary for healthy growth and development, perpetuating a cycle of malnutrition and illness. Despite these challenges, the resilience of rural Irish communities was palpable. Farmers banded together to form cooperatives and local organisations, seeking to support one another in a system that seemed designed to pit them against each other. These efforts were small beacons of hope amid the overwhelming odds stacked against them, as communities learned that collective action could sometimes challenge the status quo. As you immerse yourself in these economic realities, remember that they were not just numbers on a ledger, they represented the lives of farmers struggling against the tide. The intricate relationship between land, economy, and agriculture shaped their diets, health, and overall well-being. Now, as we shift our focus to the gender roles within farming and food preparation, we will uncover how these social dynamics affected not only the agricultural practices, but the very fabric of rural life. Gender roles in farming and food preparation as you find your place among the warm glow of the hearth. Let's explore the intricate web of gender roles that defined the lives of 19th century Irish farmers. The agricultural landscape was not just shaped by soil and climate, but by the distinct responsibilities and expectations assigned to men and women. These roles were deeply embedded in the culture and traditions of rural Ireland, influencing everything from farming techniques to food preparation and even social dynamics. Imagine a typical day on a farm, where the sun rises over the fields, casting a golden hue on the crops. Men head to the fields, ploughing and planting, while women take charge of the home, managing the household chores and preparing meals. The glamorous illusion of rural life often portrays men as the primary providers and women as the dutiful caretakers, each playing their part in a well-rehearsed performance of agricultural life. However, the shocking reality is that women's contributions to farming were often undervalued and overlooked, despite their indispensable roles in sustaining both the family and the farm. Women worked tirelessly alongside their male counterparts in the fields, particularly during planting and harvest seasons. They would help plant seeds, tend to livestock, and gather crops. Yet, while their physical labor was crucial, societal norms relegated their work to the background. The prevailing belief was that men controlled the economic and decision-making power, while women's labor was expected and often taken for granted. This gendered division of labor created a hierarchy within the household that mirrored the broader social structures of the time. Beyond the fields, women held the primary responsibility for food preparation and household management. Picture the kitchen bustling with activity as women prepared meals from the day's harvest. They would turn the potatoes into a variety of dishes from hearty stews to creamy colcannon, while also managing supplies of dairy and any available meats. The shocking truth is that the cooking and caring work of women often went unseen, contributing significantly to the family's well-being, yet receiving little recognition. The economic framework further complicated these gender dynamics. In a male-dominated agricultural economy, women had limited access to land ownership and decision-making power. This lack of agency meant that their contributions to farming were often undervalued, despite the critical role they played in sustaining households. As tenant farmers, women worked within the confines of a system that marginalized them, often relying on their husbands to make decisions that directly affected their lives. However, the resilience of women was evident in their ability to adapt and innovate within their roles. They became resourceful in managing limited resources, ensuring that families made the most out of what little they had. Women often engaged in foraging, gathering wild greens and herbs to supplement their family's diet, thereby adding nutritional variety to the monotonous fare centered around potatoes. Their knowledge of local flora was vital for survival, as it provided essential nutrients that were otherwise absent from their diets. As you consider the roles women played in both farming and food preparation, it's essential to acknowledge how these responsibilities shaped community life. Women were often the backbone of social networks, facilitating gatherings and supporting one another in times of need. When families fell on hard times, it was often the women who organized community support, sharing resources and meals among neighbors. This communal spirit fostered resilience in the face of adversity, creating a network of solidarity that transcended individual hardships. Yet, despite their critical contributions, women remained largely invisible in historical narratives about agriculture. The glamorous image of the hard-working farmer often excluded the silent strength of women who toiled behind the scenes. This oversight serves as a reminder of the importance of recognizing the multifaceted roles women played in shaping rural Irish life, both in the fields and at home. As you ponder the complexities of gender roles, remember that the story of 19th-century Irish farmers is not complete without acknowledging the tireless efforts of women. Their resilience, resourcefulness, and communal spirit contributed significantly to this fabric of rural society. With this understanding of gender dynamics, we will next delve into how religion influenced dietary customs and practices, revealing another layer of complexity in the lives of these farmers. The influence of religion on diet. As you nestle into the comforting ambience of the cottage, the flickering shadows dance along the walls, inviting you to explore the profound influence of religion on the diet and eating practices of 19th-century Irish farmers. In a country where faith interwove with daily life, the rituals and beliefs of the Catholic Church shaped not only the spiritual lives of the people but also their culinary habits. The intertwining of religion and food reveals a fascinating narrative of devotion, tradition, and the complexities of rural existence. Imagine the rhythm of the farming year punctuated by the church calendar, a series of feasts, fasts, and holy days that steered the diets of the community. Sundays were sacred. Families would gather after Mass, sharing meals that reflected their faith and unity. The glamour of these gatherings often painted a picture of abundance and joy, but the underlying reality was a delicate balance between piety and the harshness of agricultural life. During Lent, for example, the practice of fasting transformed dietary habits dramatically. Observant Catholics abstained from eating meat, turning to vegetables, fish, and dairy instead. This period of penance created a reliance on what was readily available, prompting families to become more resourceful with their meals. The shock of this dietary shift was felt particularly keenly by farmers who relied on meat for sustenance. The absence of meat during this time meant that families had to adapt their cooking methods and ingredients, relying heavily on the very crops they grew. This dependence on religious customs extended to the celebration of harvest festivals, where the bounty of the fields was acknowledged in gratitude to God. Events like Lammas Day, which celebrated the first fruits of the harvest, became occasions for communities to come together in thanksgiving. Imagine the vibrant gatherings filled with laughter, music, and the sharing of freshly baked bread made from the first grains harvested. The sense of community during these celebrations fostered a connection between faith, agriculture, and social cohesion. Yet, alongside the joyous occasions, the influence of religion often perpetuated certain societal norms that reinforced social hierarchies. The Church played a significant role in maintaining traditional gender roles. Women were expected to uphold the moral standards of the family, particularly when it came to food preparation and domestic duties. The emphasis on piety and purity also influenced how meals were perceived and prepared, often placing an undue burden on women to meet these expectations. Consider how this religious framework created both a sense of belonging and exclusion. While communal worship fostered camaraderie among families, the rigid adherence to religious practices could lead to guilt and anxiety during times of hardship, particularly if families struggled to provide the traditional meals expected for celebrations. This added layer of pressure reinforced the notion that food was not just sustenance but a reflection of faith and righteousness, complicating the relationship between diet and spirituality. Moreover, the concept of food as sacrament was deeply ingrained in the Irish Catholic tradition. Bread and wine were not merely elements of meals, they represented the body and blood of Christ during Mass. This sacramental view of food imbued everyday meals with a greater significance, reinforcing the idea that dining was an act of devotion. The customs surrounding food were steeped in the spiritual, transforming the mundane act of eating into a profound expression of faith. As you reflect on the role of religion in shaping the diets of these farmers, remember that their culinary practices were not isolated from their spiritual beliefs. The intertwining of faith, food, and community created a rich tapestry that defined rural Irish life, blending the sacred with the everyday. With this understanding of religious influence, we can now explore the seasonal eating habits of Irish farmers, revealing how the agricultural calendar dictated not only what they ate but how they lived throughout the year. Seasonal eating, a rural calendar. As you sink deeper into the cozy atmosphere of the cottage, let's turn our attention to the rhythms of the seasons that dictated the dietary habits of 19th-century Irish farmers. The agricultural calendar was not merely a series of dates, it was a way of life that shaped how families lived, worked, and ate throughout the year. This seasonal cycle framed their existence, influencing not only what was grown and consumed but also how communities came together in celebration and survival. Imagine the arrival of spring, when the earth, thawed and eager, beckons families to begin their work. The air is fragrant with the promise of new life as seeds are sown into the warm soil. During this time, potatoes are planted, alongside other vegetables like cabbage and carrots. The glamour of spring lies in its potential hope that the hard work will yield a bountiful harvest. But beneath that optimism resides the shocking reality, the anxiety that spring farming brings. Farmers labor under the weight of uncertainty, praying that the weather will cooperate and that pests won't decimate their newly planted crops. As summer unfolds, the landscape transforms into a patchwork of vibrant greens and golds. The longer days mean more time for work in the fields. Farmers are busy weeding, watering, and nurturing their crops, but they are also mindful of the looming threat of drought or disease. The seasonal eating habits reflect this effort, as the early harvests of greens and root vegetables find their way to the table. Families enjoy dishes made from fresh produce, celebrating the fleeting moments of abundance. However, the reliance on a single crop, especially the potato, persists beneath this surface joy. The arrival of autumn signals the harvest season, a time of both excitement and trepidation. Imagine the frantic energy as families come together to gather the fruits of their labor, the fields buzzing with activity. The bounty is a welcome sight, yet it comes with the weight of expectation. Farmers are acutely aware that the success of this harvest will dictate their survival through the harsh winter months. The glamour of the harvest celebration, where communities gather to share meals and acknowledge their hard work, starkly contrasts with the underlying fear of what happens when the crops run out. The harvest feast itself, often accompanied by songs and laughter, is a moment of respite. Picture families sitting around tables laden with food derived from their fields, a celebration of resilience and thankfulness. Yet the shocking reality is that for many, this feast is bittersweet, serving as a reminder of the uncertainty that lies ahead. The food abundance of autumn will soon turn into scarcity as winter approaches, forcing families to rely on preserved and stored foods. As winter sets in, the landscape takes on a quiet, almost somber tone. The fields lay dormant under a blanket of frost, and the focus shifts to making the most of what has been harvested. Families turn to root vegetables and preserved goods, dried meats, pickled vegetables, and dairy products. The winter diet, while sustaining, often lacks the diversity of the warmer months. Imagine the stark contrast between the vibrant meals of summer and the hearty but monotonous fare of winter, which often consisted of hearty potato and cabbage dishes. This cycle of seasonal eating is intricately tied to the cultural practices of the time. Farmers learned to adapt their meals based on what was available, creating a cuisine deeply rooted in the land's rhythm. Foraging in the woods and fields during certain seasons added variety to their diets, with wild greens and berries being gathered in spring and summer. These practices fostered a connection to the environment and a deep understanding of the seasons. Yet, despite this adaptability, the seasonal nature of their diet also left farmers vulnerable to the unpredictability of the weather. A late frost could ruin tender shoots, while a summer drought could cripple entire harvests. The reliance on seasonal cycles created an inherent tension. The joy of abundance was always shadowed by the fear of scarcity. As you reflect on the seasonal eating habits of these farmers, remember that their lives were a constant dance with nature, an intricate balance of hope and anxiety that shaped their diets and their lives. Each season brought its own set of challenges and rewards, forging an unbreakable bond between the land and the people. With this understanding of seasonal eating, we will now explore the importance of community and sharing, revealing how the communal aspect of food production and consumption played a vital role in the lives of Irish farmers. The importance of community and sharing. As you lean back into the inviting warmth of the cottage, let's delve into the profound significance of community and sharing in the lives of 19th-century Irish farmers. In a world steeped in agricultural toil and uncertainty, the bonds forged through collective effort and mutual support became vital lifelines for survival. The act of sharing food, resources, and labor not only nourished bodies, but also strengthened the social fabric of rural life, creating a sense of belonging that transcended individual hardship. Imagine a bustling farmyard during the harvest season, where neighbors gather to lend a hand. The sun shines down as laughter mingles with the sounds of worksith slicing through tall grasses, baskets overflowing with potatoes and grains. This communal effort, known as the harvest home, reflects the beauty of collaboration. The glamour of these gatherings symbolizes resilience and solidarity, creating a sense of shared purpose that deepens community ties. However, the shocking reality is that this communal spirit often emerged from necessity. In the face of economic pressures and the reliance on a single crop, farmers recognized that their very survival depended on cooperation. When one family struggled, it was not just their burden, it became a collective concern. Neighbors would step in to help, knowing that the cycle of sharing would eventually return to them in times of need. This interdependence fostered a culture where generosity was expected and reciprocated, weaving a safety net of support that was crucial for all. The importance of sharing extended beyond labor and harvests. It permeated the very meals that families enjoyed together. Picture the communal potluck, where families would bring dishes to share, creating a mosaic of flavors and textures. Each contribution was a reflection of individual efforts, a testament to the hard work put into growing, gathering, and preparing food. This communal dining experience not only satisfied hunger, but strengthened social bonds, reinforcing a sense of identity and belonging within the community. Moreover, food played a significant role in cultural rituals and celebrations, often bringing people together in joyous feasts. Festivals tied to the agricultural calendar, such as Lammas Day and harvest festivals, were occasions for communities to express gratitude for the bounty of the land. These events were marked by traditional dishes, music, dance, and storytelling, creating a vibrant tapestry of shared experiences that transcended the challenges of daily life. Yet, amid the warmth of communal sharing, the reality of vulnerability persisted. For many families, especially during difficult times like the Great Famine, the community's strength became their only lifeline. When crops failed, it was the communal spirit that rallied support for those in need. Rural communities often organized relief efforts, pooling resources and food supplies to ensure that no one went hungry. This was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, a fierce determination to protect one another in the face of adversity. However, this reliance on communal support also revealed the fragility of these social structures. When families faced eviction or found themselves without means, the entire community felt the strain. The interconnectedness of rural life meant that hardships could ripple through the social network, affecting everyone. The illusion of self-sufficiency was often just that, an illusion, as the reality of dependence on one another became starkly apparent. As you reflect on the significance of community and sharing, remember that these values were not just niceties, they were essential for survival. The bonds forged through collective toil, shared meals, and communal celebrations created a resilient network that defined rural Irish life. In a world where uncertainty loomed large, the act of coming together was both a source of comfort and the foundation of strength. With this understanding of the communal aspects of food production and consumption, we will now explore the transition to modern agriculture, examining how these changes affected dietary practices and the lives of Irish farmers. The transition to modern agriculture. As you find your place within the comforting shadows of the cottage, let's embark on a journey to explore the transition from traditional farming practices to modern agriculture in 19th century Ireland. This shift did not occur in isolation. It was influenced by a blend of social, economic, and political factors that transformed the landscape of rural life. Understanding this evolution is crucial in appreciating how it affected the diets, livelihoods, and cultural identities of Irish farmers. Imagine the fields once cultivated by hand, the rhythm of life dictated by the seasons and the agricultural calendar. These traditional methods, developed over generations, were rooted in a deep understanding of the land and its cycles. But as the 19th century progressed, the push for modernization began to take hold. The glamour of mechanization, with promises of increased efficiency and productivity, beckoned farmers to adopt new practices and technologies. However, this shift came with both opportunities and challenges, leading to profound changes in agricultural life. The shocking reality is that many farmers were hesitant to embrace modern techniques. Relying on traditional practices meant that communities had developed a strong sense of identity tied to their methods of farming. The introduction of agricultural innovations such as crop rotation, mechanized ploughing, and selective breeding altered the landscape of farming, but not without resistance. For many, the value of their heritage and the connection to the land were paramount, creating a tension between the old ways and the new. As landowners sought to maximize profits, they began to invest in new technologies, which led to changes in the way farming was conducted. The introduction of machinery, such as seed drills and threshing machines, promised greater yields but also required capital investment that many tenant farmers could not afford. The economic framework that had long marginalized these farmers now wove a complex tapestry of dependency on landowners who controlled access to modern technology. The farmers who could not adapt found themselves trapped, struggling to compete in a rapidly changing agricultural landscape. Amidst this transition, the diet of Irish farmers began to shift as well. The push towards monoculture, growing single crops for profit, was exacerbated by the allure of commercial viability. While the potato remained a staple, the increased focus on cash crops like Barley and oats changed the landscape of food availability. Instead of cultivating a variety of crops for household consumption, many farmers began to prioritize those that would yield financial returns, often at the expense of nutritional diversity. The shocking truth was that the very advancements intended to improve agricultural efficiency could lead to a more precarious food system, as reliance on fewer crops left families vulnerable to crop failures. This transition was further complicated by societal changes brought about by urbanization. As people flocked to cities in search of work and a better life, the rural landscape underwent dramatic transformations. The movement away from agrarian lifestyles led to a disconnect between food production and consumption, distancing families from the land that had once sustained them. The communal meals and harvest celebrations that had once forged strong bonds began to fade as families adapted to new urban environments, losing touch with their agricultural roots. Yet, amidst these changes, a spirit of resilience remained. Many farmers began to innovate within their circumstances, adopting new techniques while still preserving aspects of their traditional practices. Cooperative societies emerged, allowing farmers to pool resources and access modern technologies collectively, thereby ensuring that they could remain competitive without losing their connection to the land. As you reflect on this transition to modern agriculture, consider how it reshaped not only the landscape of farming but also the very identities of the people who worked it. The tension between tradition and innovation, between community and individualism, created a complex narrative that continues to resonate today. The evolution of agricultural practices has left an indelible mark on the diets and lives of Irish farmers, moulding their experiences in ways both profound and lasting. With this understanding of the transition to modern agriculture, we will now explore the legacy of 19th century diets, examining how the dietary practices of the past continue to echo in contemporary Irish cuisine. The legacy of 19th century diets. As you reflect on the rich tapestry of rural Irish life, let's turn our gaze toward the legacy of 19th century diets and how the eating habits of that era continue to resonate in contemporary Irish cuisine. The influences of traditional farming practices, seasonal eating, and communal values have woven themselves into the fabric of modern culinary culture, creating a complex interplay of history and identity that still shapes how food is perceived and enjoyed today. Imagine walking through an Irish market, where the vibrant colours of fresh vegetables, artisanal bread, and locally sourced meats beckon you to explore the offerings. You might find yourself drawn to the familiar comfort of dishes that have endured through the centuries: Irish stew, colcannon, and soda bread, all rich with the flavours of tradition. The glamour of these beloved meals evokes a sense of nostalgia, a connection to a heritage that celebrates resilience and resourcefulness. Yet, as we savour these dishes, the shocking reality is that many of them have roots in the very challenges faced by farmers of the 19th century. The diet was shaped by necessity, influenced by the seasons, and built upon the foundational crops that sustained generations. Potatoes, once the cornerstone of survival, now find their place in a variety of contemporary dishes, showcasing both their versatility and the cultural significance they hold in Irish culinary heritage. Perhaps you recall the stories of families gathering around the table to share hearty meals during the harsh winters, relying on preserved foods that echoed the agricultural practices of their ancestors. These moments of togetherness fostered a deep appreciation for the simple, nourishing fare that defined their existence. Today, the emphasis on communal dining continues as families and friends come together to celebrate not just food but the bonds that tie them to one another and to their history. As you delve deeper into contemporary Irish cuisine, you'll find a growing trend toward farm-to-table practices, where local ingredients are celebrated and traditional recipes are given new life. This movement reflects a desire to reconnect with the land, reminiscent of the communal spirit that characterized rural life in the 19th century. Chefs and home cooks alike are increasingly seeking out seasonal produce, artisanal breads, and heritage grains, echoing the resourcefulness and adaptability of their ancestors. However, the legacy of the past also serves as a reminder of the fragility of food systems. The reliance on monoculture and the impact of the Great Famine remain etched in the collective memory of the Irish people. The awareness of food security and the importance of biodiversity in agriculture have become central to contemporary discussions about sustainable farming practices. The lessons learned from the hardships of the past drive a renewed commitment to cultivating resilience in today's food systems. Moreover, the influence of immigration and globalization has added rich layers to Irish cuisine, blending traditional flavors with new ingredients and techniques. As the Irish diaspora spread across the globe, they carried their culinary traditions with them, adapting them to new environments while preserving the essence of their heritage. This fusion of flavors reflects the ongoing dialogue between tradition and innovation that defines contemporary Irish cooking. As you ponder the legacy of 19th century diets, recognize that they are not relics of the past, but living traditions that continue to evolve. The essence of communal sharing, the celebration of local ingredients, and the importance of seasonal eating resonate deeply in modern Irish culture. The stories of resilience, adaptation, and connection to this land remain at the heart of how food is experienced and cherished today. With this appreciation for the enduring legacy of Irish diets, we will now turn our attention to the resilience of Irish culture and food, celebrating how the traditions of the past continue to flourish in the present and shape the future. The resilience of Irish culture and food. As you lean back in your chair, enveloped by the warmth of the hearth, let's celebrate the resilience of Irish culture and food, a testament to a rich history steeped in both struggle and triumph. The culinary traditions that have emerged from the trials of the past are not just remnants of history, they are living, breathing expressions of identity, community, and continuity that continue to thrive in contemporary Ireland. The journey of Irish farmers through hardship has cultivated a profound appreciation for food, family, and heritage that resonates deeply today. Imagine a lively gathering where laughter fills the air, and the scent of simmering stew wafts through the room. Friends and family come together, sharing not only meals, but stories and memories. The glamour of this scene lies in its simplicity, a celebration of togetherness that harkens back to the communal spirit of the 19th century. Each shared dish carries a history, a connection to the land and the people who tilled it, reminding everyone present of their roots. The shocking reality is that this spirit of resilience has been forged through centuries of adversity. The Great Famine, the struggles against colonial oppression, and the subsequent waves of migration have all shaped the Irish identity, binding generations together through shared experiences. Food has become a vessel for storytelling, a medium through which the struggles and successes of the past are passed down. As families gather around the table, they not only savor the flavors of their heritage, but also imbue those meals with meaning, each bite a reminder of the strength it took to preserve their culture. In contemporary Ireland, this resilient spirit manifests in a renewed interest in traditional culinary practices and local sourcing of ingredients. Farmers' markets bloom across the countryside, where communities come together to celebrate local produce and artisanal goods. The resurgence of heritage crops, once nearly lost to industrial agriculture, reflects a commitment to preserving biodiversity and honoring the land. You can taste this connection in a bowl of freshly prepared colcannon, made from locally sourced potatoes, and greens, a dish that evokes memories of a communal past while embodying a sustainable future. Yet, the resilience of Irish culture is not confined to the rural landscape. It expands into urban centres, where diverse culinary influences converge. The blending of traditional Irish fare with global cuisines has given rise to a vibrant food scene that honours the past while embracing the future. Chefs experiment with ancient grains, craft innovative recipes, and create dishes that reflect the burgeoning multiculturalism of modern Irish society. This evolution speaks to the heart of the Irish experience, a willingness to adapt, to embrace change while remaining grounded in tradition. As you savour the rich, hearty flavours of contemporary Irish dishes, you're not just indulging in a meal, you're participating in a living tradition, one that honours the resilience of those who came before and celebrates the possibilities of what lies ahead. Moreover, the legacy of food as a source of comfort is deeply ingrained in Irish culture. During difficult times, whether facing economic hardship or personal loss, food has served as a unifying force, bringing people together to share in their grief and joy. The act of preparing and sharing meals continues to be a vital expression of love, care, and support within families and communities. It's a reminder that, despite the challenges of life, there is solace to be found in gathering around the table. As you reflect on the resilience of Irish culture and food, understand that this journey is far from over. The traditions that flourished through adversity are being revitalized and reimagined, ensuring that the essence of Irish identity remains vibrant and relevant. Each meal shared, each recipe passed down, and each gathering around the table reinforces the bonds of community and the enduring spirit of a culture rooted in resilience. With this appreciation for the richness of Irish culture and food, we conclude our journey through the surprisingly simple diet of 19th century Irish farmers. The past may shape our present, but it is in the act of sharing stories and meals that we forge connections and ensure that the legacy of resilience continues to thrive in our lives today.